Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary. We have a full house this morning. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Social commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth. Well, Seth is muted, so I will say hi, John, for him. Hi, John. Okay, go ahead. I don't know. You're still weirdly muted.
He's
I don't understand why.
Not muted, but his mic doesn't work.
Your mic doesn't work. So we will let you reestablish your mic while I bring up the following. Donald Trump is in Asia. We have not talked about tariffs. He's in Asia. He went to Japan. They had a love fest. They didn't agree on tariffs. He's going to have a meeting later this week where the Chinese are going to be present and apparently is going to attempt to walk back the tariff war that he started unilaterally. And that's kind of interesting because it's also happening on the day this morning, later when we're done with this podcast, where the Supreme Court is going to start hearing arguments about whether or not Trump has the power under these does he have the emergency power to impose unilateral tariffs? So tariff day here, and I have one thing to say and then we can go on, which is my wife goes online looking for pants to buy online for my 15-year-old son. And she says, wait, this is really weird. They cost twice as much as they did 3 months ago, the pants. And then she says, do you think it's the tariffs? And I said, I guess so. I don't really know why, but I guess so. Now, if she represents a kind of American body of opinion that starts to look at inflated prices of things and starts instantly going to the place where you say, well, something's happened here, unexpected, large increases in prices involving goods that are made abroad, is that the tariffs? I don't think that's good for Trump. So a lot of stuff is happening here where I think Trump himself and Scott Bessent and others are now looking at the political consequences of the high on his own supply, tariffs are the greatest thing ever mood that he was in back in January, February, and March.
First, just want to correct something you said.
Okay.
The Supreme Court is going to hear the tariff case next Tuesday.
Oh, really? My God. Yeah. How did I miss?
November 5th. So,
November 5th. Okay.
Trump
Which is also election day. So that's an interesting day.
Trump will have returned from Asia.
Yeah.
By the time they hear the case. In fact, Trump has raised the possibility that he may attend the hearing at the Supreme Court because of how invested he is in the outcome. Second,
do you think he can get a seat? Because you have to line up early. And
I think they'll save him a seat.
All right.
I just think so. Second,
by the way, has a president, do you think, ever sat in the Supreme Court at a?
That's a question for Grok, which may give you an anti-Semitic answer.
You are my Grok.
I don't believe so.
Okay,
I don't believe so.
Right.
Yeah, remember,
I can't
it was only Woodrow Wilson who began giving the State of the Union in person.
Right.
So there's always another precedent for Trump to set. But
the answer is William Howard Taft.
Is it? Did you just Grok?
Well, no, he was the Chief Justice.
I mean, he became the justice.
Yeah.
Oh, so I see. So you're saying he was present at all Supreme Court.
He was a president
proceedings when he was the Chief Justice
and a Supreme Court justice.
Remember there was some speculation that Obama would be appointed to the Supreme Court.
Yes,
after he left office.
Yeah,
and that didn't happen.
But then he couldn't build the Death Star on the south side of Chicago.
No, it's the ship from Arrival.
Yeah, the ship from Arrival. It's Immortan Joe's palace in Mad Max Fury Road. Yeah. Who knows what the hell it is? But if I'm living anywhere near that thing, I am moving the heck away. Anyway, please.
I think the way to approach Trump's trip is through the prism of this wonderful World Series that we're having in America. It's an international World Series. It's the the Blue Jays, a Canadian-based team, even though I don't think any of their players are Canadian. I'm not sure. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm speculating. Against the Dodgers, what Bob Dole called the Brooklyn Dodgers, but who have been in Los Angeles for some time. And the funny thing about the Dodgers, who won an epic 18-inning game that ended at 3:20 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, making the series 2-1, is that their stars are all Japanese, and Trump is in Japan. So here we have Trump aligned.
Can I interrupt? Because this is a very important point. You know how we talk about jobs Americans won't do? Yeah. And and like if you are a sort of fan of immigration, you say the thing is they're so immigrants are so hardworking. Americans have sort of gotten lazy and soft. Let's just talk about the two major Japanese players on the Los Angeles Dodgers. So we'll put Shohei Ohtani off to one side. So this pitcher Yamamoto, right, pitches the first complete game in a World Series in 7 years.
Yeah,
7 years. Now, can pitchers pitch complete games? Yes. My whole life, pitchers pitched complete games. Tom Seaver, the best pitcher in the majors in the 1970s, pitched more complete games than he pitched games in which he was taken out in the late innings. And now nobody does because of sabermetrics and things like that. But Yamamoto's like, I'm staying in this game. I'm going to pitch this whole game, rip this ball from my hands. I am not leaving. And Shohei Ohtani, obviously the most supernatural player in history. What did he do last night? Over 18 innings. And he's pitching tonight.
Yes.
He was up to bat 9 times. He was walked 5 times. He got 4 hits, 2 of them home
runs, and 2 doubles.
He's now hit 8 homers in the postseason. And the story of his postseason, at least for the first couple of weeks, was he was having a terrible postseason. But he can't possibly have a terrible. And I'm just saying, if you want evidence of high-skilled immigration being a net positive for the United States, you need only look at the Los Angeles Dodgers.
I think we can agree that Shohei Ohtani is an extreme case. It's but like that's he, like.
But is he really?
I agree with your general point.
But I do like Matt's point about it, because people used to complain that calling it the World Series was another example of like American imperialistic thought, or an America-centric outlook, that Americans just think they're the whole world. But it really is the World Series, because it really is the best players in the world. Even the World Series involving more than one country. More important,
yes.
As much as it pains me to say this as a Max Scherzer stan, it is the anti-Canada series, because
is true.
As he met with the new Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi in Tokyo, Donald Trump watched the Dodgers Blue Jays game, and I assume they both were rooting for the Dodgers. Takaichi because of Ohtani and Yamamoto, and Sasaki, another Japanese pitcher that they have, and Trump because he's amidst a trade war with Canada over the Ronald Reagan ad. But
I want to mention Toronto has one Canadian player, and talk about the flavor of the world. Okay, the best player in the playoffs for Toronto, Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yes.
Son of the great Vladimir Guerrero, who is hitting 700 or something insane in the postseason. Born in Montreal, Dominican.
Yes, I didn't realize he was born in Montreal. That makes sense.
And his first name is Vladimir. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the Canadian player on the Blue Jays.
Yeah, that's
what
interesting.
What a world we live in.
There you go. Okay, I stand corrected.
Thank you. Yes.
So one serious point about what's happening.
By the way, Vladimir Guerrero Sr.'s brother is Eliezer. Or
really?
Elazar,
okay, so
however
we got Vladimir and Eliezer.
They're like a very biblical themed family, but so you have Vladimir Guerrero, Elazar Guerrero.
Yeah.
The whole family is wonderful.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah. So on to the Asia trip, kind of a
this
substitute.
is like my
point.
brain as an agent. This entire podcast is now turning into a version of what I will be like when I have Alzheimer's.
Well, we had to talk about the World Series.
Yes, we
game.
did.
That's just
Okay,
incredible.
yes, okay.
It's been so much fun.
Oh my
I'm
God,
looking forward
so
to Game
amazing,
4 tonight.
amazing.
In any case, what's going on with this trip? I think it's interesting. Trump goes to Malaysia first, and he kind of gets an addendum to the ceasefire he helped negotiate between Thailand and Cambodia. Then he gets some rare earth deals. He signs those. Then he goes to Japan, and you're right that even though the tenor of the meeting was extremely positive, Trump brought Takeichi up to the lectern when he addressed the troops. He had his arm around her in a very funny photo that I urge everyone to look at because she doesn't seem all too comfortable, but nonetheless, he seems to really like her, which is excellent. They also signed a rare earths agreement, even though they didn't get into the weeds on the overall trade deal. And then he's going to go to Korea, where he's going to meet with the Korean president, of course, who replaced the previous Korean president, who was convicted for staging a coup.
The 6-hour coup.
The 6-hour coup.
Yeah.
And the current president is a diehard left-winger. And so that's going to be a very interesting meeting. And then he meets Xi Jinping on Thursday. And when I look at this trip unfold, what I'm seeing is Trump going into the Xi Jinping meeting saying, look, I have my best friend, Takeichi, the ally of my previous best friend, Shinzo Abe, arm in arm. The U.S.-Japan alliance is extremely strong. Don't you think otherwise, Xi Jinping? Number two, I have all these rare earth deals that I'm accumulating. But before I left on the trip, I had one with Australia too, all the Pacific Rim nations. What I'm doing, Trump is thinking, I believe, is making sure that America has independent capacity on these critical minerals in the case of any conflict. And so Xi Jinping, I have some leverage through de-risking or decoupling or whatever term of art you want to use as we prepare to sign this framework on trade that has been negotiated with my Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. So I think this is a very substantive trip, but it all rides on the outcome of Thursday's meeting with Xi Jinping and whether this framework that has been announced, coupled with the leverage from the allies, actually gets us to a place where we have a deal with China that it can maybe last at least through the end of the year, let's say.
But I think he's over confident on the leverage he thinks he has. China still controls 80% of rare earth, the supply chain, 80%. And they've already shown, I think, their decoupling from the U.S. began a long time before our, just this week. So they've had these independent sources. When Trump's tariffs were imposed and the soybeans weren't being sent, they just went and bought them from Brazil. So I think they come into this negotiation in a much stronger position, with Xi obviously having learned a great deal from Trump's first term about how to handle things with him. And it will be interesting to see. Trump also hasn't really engaged with the point, John, that I think you made about Ayala looking at prices of clothing. Americans are starting to ask, when looking at higher prices, inflation has remained at a level that isn't ideal during an election cycle. And so he's got a lot to answer for. There's a lot riding on this, but I also think he doesn't come into it with as much leverage as he might be projecting right now. It's great. I'm very happy to see the alliance with Japan be reaffirmed publicly, and that's all for the good. But I wonder if he's going to get a little outsmarted by Xi on this one. There are a lot of issues here that I don't think that Bessent's sort of vague discussions of a framework have engaged. So we'll see. But I'm less confident that he's going to get what he thinks he's going to get.
If you consider where we are now and the degree to which Trump can claim a series of foreign policy successes, the shadow over this unambiguously positive record in these 10 months of his presidency are the tariffs, or is the tariffs. I'm sorry. That's the shadow. That is the uncertainty. He now has not only the list of ceasefires or deconflictions that he has been involved in on 3 continents, I think, aside from Asia, aside from Gaza and Israel, or Hamas and Israel. He has, whether his intervention played a role or not, and one can assume that it played some kind of role, he has Javier Milei, the most pro-American, pro-Western leader in the history of South America, just won an astonishingly sweeping victory in Argentina. If you were reading about it in the months before this, you would have thought Milei was toast, that he was, that he was going to go down, as in history as the guy who committed himself to market principles and was a weirdo, and then he got taken out, and the pretty much the
Can I
opposite happened.
interrupt
Yeah.
by introducing the headline that I noticed on Sunday before the election that speaks to the conventional wisdom about Milei? This is a headline from the Wall Street Journal, October 24th. Milei's overhaul of Argentina has another problem. He isn't great at politics. So, sorry.
Don't
Sorry.
do that to yourself. Never
is
write
as
a
I
headline
say,
like that on the
I don't
media
read
lecture.
anything anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'd read something.
Yeah, you read it
to complain about.
Yeah, I mean, no, but so what I'm saying is, what's interesting is that he has compiled at least an almost unprecedented first year of foreign policy successes. I know it's a second term in some ways and a first term in other ways. Can't think of really anything that compares with this in different places. And yet here we are with economic uncertainty relating to the tariffs, and then the weird thing that happened last week where, though he's having this substantive trip, it's sort of, again, overshadowed a little bit by his mad king behavior toward the provincial government of Ontario's pro-free trade commercial. And Matt, you have written a piece in the Free Press this morning about why it is that Trump was so rattled by the commercial and rattled by the use of this edited speech radio talk by Ronald Reagan about tariffs.
Well,
Go ahead.
I just want to say something about this shadow of tariffs and his mishigas with Canada. Don't you think Trump always wants there to be a shadow? He needs it. It's part of how he operates. He needs there to be a long shot bid that everyone is counting against, that he needs to talk up, fight for, and drive everyone crazy with, even if everything else is going right.
Is that a strategy, or is that like a kind of animal cunning? He does it and because that's who he is, and that it has this effect, or is there method to this madness? I just don't know the answer.
I don't know the answer either.
I think it's just his temperament. He's a drama llama, as we used to call some of the more dramatic.
Right. Yeah.
He feeds on it.
Yeah, but like that commercial could have gone right. I mean, it was a commercial. It was on a couple of times on football, because I saw it a couple of times on football on Thursday night or something during Thursday Night Football, and then he just went absolutely ballistic over it.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing before we go, which is the corruption of the conservative institutions of the United States that we've seen over the last couple of years, and trying to figure out how to maintain their influence with Trump, who is obviously not a conventional conservative in any understanding, and sort of the way the Heritage Foundation has gone, the Claremont Institute and other places have gone. I frankly find what the Reagan Foundation did in disavowing the commercial and claiming that it misrepresented Ronald Reagan's views on trade, which it did. The Ronald Reagan Foundation did say, I'm sorry, or the institute said, I'm sorry, this is not how Reagan really felt about tariffs, to be among the most disgraceful things that any conservative institution has done.
I'm going to defend my friends at the Reagan Foundation for a second, because they didn't, if you read the statement, it is very careful. It says it met the Canada ad, which for those of you who haven't seen it, it's the 60-second spot. It ran on the NFL and it ran in the World Series again. Oh, Canada! And it's it's a pretty, I think, anodyne political ad. It shows a lot of kind of illuminated images of shipping and stores and families. And then when it talks about the cost of tariffs and economic warfare, it shows empty storefronts and deindustrialized places. But over that, over the imagery, is Ronald Reagan's voice. And it's Ronald Reagan talking about the costs of trade wars and how tariffs start out innocent enough, but like most government interventions, lead to unintended consequences that are much more harmful than the ailment you're trying to cure at the beginning. Now, that speech that the ad quotes from took place in the spring of 1987. And what the Reagan Foundation pointed out was that the speech itself was an announcement of tariffs and punitive trade measures against Japan, which was the dominant economic competitor, so to speak, during Reagan's presidency. And so I do think the foundation had a point here, which is that the speech itself left out the context of the speech. However, as I say in my piece in the Free Press, Trump is also wrong to say that, as he did repeatedly in his denunciations of the ad, that Ronald Reagan loved tariffs, all caps, exclamation point. And that's not true at all. Reagan's position on trade and tariffs was that of a avowed free trader. It was very important to his overall philosophy. And the trade actions he took as president, mainly against Japan, were always done with an air of reluctance and regret. So
there were two major things that Reagan did on trade with Japan. One major thing related to national security and the question of whether or not Japan itself was exporting things to the Soviet Union or was trading with the Soviet Union products, high-tech electronic products that were damaging to U.S. national security. That was in the early 80s. This was about dumping. And nobody in the world of free trade believes that countries should be permitted to sell their goods below, to sell their goods at a loss in order to destroy the market of another country. Dumping is, there are international trade agreements that say that dumping is essentially a violation of all trade compacts, and Japan was clearly dumping semiconductors at the time. This is not the claim that Trump is making to support the tariff regime that included 83% tariffs on the Marshall Islands.
Also, can I just appoint a data
Marshall
point?
Islands aren't dumping anything.
A data point to remember is that Reagan also got Congress to pass that. He was dealing with a piece of legislation in some of these cases with tariff protectionism, and none of the deals that Trump is going around striking now will matter if the Supreme Court next week says emergency powers cannot be used to raise revenue in this way. I mean, not all of the tariffs, but he did. His approach was the one that I think is going to be the question that the Supreme Court is going to answer in these two cases next week, which is it Congress's power constitutionally to raise revenue through tariffs, or do these emergency powers overstep that authority?
Yeah, I mean, the question that the court faces next week is is Trump asserting a delegated power under a specific trade statute? The acronym is IEEPA. It's not the statutes that Trump asserted his. It's not the statute that Trump asserted his tariff powers under in the first term.
Right.
And so the issue is, does what he's doing fall under how Congress delegated the authority under this particular act? Now, Reagan was retaliating under other acts, but I just want to point out that one reason Reagan was or took protectionist measures, even as he always supported the theories behind free trade, was he was dealing with a protectionist Democratic Congress.
Exactly, they would have been worse.
Which wanted much more
Right.
Tariffs and industrial policy to combat Japan. So he would have to kind of block or co-opt certain measures in order to forestall worse outcomes. What I think is interesting is
there's not enough time in a 30-second spot, I think, to say all that, though. In defense of the commercial.
In defense of the spot, it's a 60-second spot. So
yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's right. But, this is what historians, we like to talk about. And among the people who were critical of Reagan at the time was Donald Trump, who the year... it's interesting. In 1987, the same year that Reagan gave the radio address that's quoted in the ad, that was the year that, Reagan met Trump. It's the only recorded meeting of the two. It was a White House reception, not in the East Wing. I double-checked. Not in the historic East Wing that we must cry over every day when we wake up, but in the Blue Room of the actual White House. That's where they met. There's a photograph. And then Trump, and then not long after, Trump takes out his full-page ad in the New York Times saying that, you may have heard this before, America's allies are cheating us, they're taking advantage of us, and the only way to be tough is to tax them or tariff them. Yeah. So Reagan and Trump were at odds in the 1980s over trade. And what I think is interesting about the fight over the Canada ad is Trump has been trying to co-opt Reagan, in particular during this second term. And so any reminder that Reagan had a different philosophy of international trade, and more other aspects of their philosophies differ as well, I think gets Trump really angry. It's not just about influencing the Supreme Court, which is what Trump said. It's about the reminder that on this particular question and others, but on this central fact of Trump's economic policy, Ronald Reagan had a very different point of view.
Anyway, I think what's so remarkable about this moment, maybe we sort of take it in Abe's direction, that Trump always had, there has to be a thing where Trump takes something too far. It's like sort of putting sugar out, near a flies, sort of doing something to attract flies over here so that you can do something over there. So he puts out a sugar bomb or something like that. And then the media all, like, you could say this about the ballroom. The ballroom and the leveling of the East Wing, a week spent talking about the ballroom and the leveling of the East Wing, is an insane distraction for the Democrats, who have all kinds of other things that they could be engaging Trump on, about which Trump seems to be unpopular and about which their views seem to be more popular. But he has this uncanny ability to steal their attention and move them in another direction, away from the things that might hurt him more profoundly. Now, it's also possible that, not that I think Democrats think this, or anybody thinks this way logically, but if the tariffs end up having this effect on inflation and on the economy, it's going to be so big. It's going to be so, it's one of those things where it doesn't matter what you say or what you do. If the American people feel like their purchasing power is being halved and the costs are going up and all of that, no amount of saying Ronald Reagan thought this or I thought that or the tariffs are bad or this or that, people are going to go, I don't like things in my household are getting more expensive and nobody's helping me with that. And I think Washington is responsible for that. Trump's going to pay for that next year.
He literally has to pay back the tariffs he's already collected if this case goes against him.
I mean, I don't even know how. I mean, nobody.
I don't know if
no one knows how that
case.
will look, but like theoretically, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it is.
He'd have
Things
to
are
sell
more
the new
expensive.
ballroom.
Well, he's already sold it. It's like the producer.
but
I'm sure
I
he's already
wanna push
sold
back.
it 500 times. He's probably raised $5 billion for the ballroom.
Okay, but I want
Probably
to
gonna
push
cost
back, John,
$200
on this
million.
idea that this is somehow some cunning strategy that Trump has, and like I'm going to distract them by bulldozing, the East Wing and building a ballroom. I don't think that is at all what he does. I think he's just constantly testing the limits of executive power in all kinds of realms. He's doing it with immigration, he's doing it with tariffs, he's doing it with bulldozing the East Wing, and at each point, it does draw fire from his opposition, sometimes insanely stupid fire, and it's a distraction for them. But I don't think his strategy is to draw out his enemies in that way. I think he's just doing all the stuff he said he wanted to do, and he's taking it to the absolute max. He's a second termer, and in the next 2 years, he'll really be potentially, if Congress goes to the Democrats, he's going to be investigated nonstop. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of trouble. So he is really pushing it to get as much of his agenda done. I just don't see it as him being cunning. I think it's just his temperament as an executive.
I was thinking
The reason I agree with that when it comes to the ballroom, at least, is because the objections to the ballroom fall into two categories. There is the, everything has a legitimate process and there should be, we should know all the donors. We should know where the money's coming from. These things seem obvious, right? There should be transparency in anything the government is doing, whether with private or public money, especially to the White House. And category two, Eleanor Roosevelt sat in the East Wing once, and there was even a photograph of her sitting at a desk in the East Wing, and Trump just destroyed it. And therefore, Hitler, right? Those are the two categories into which the objections are coming. And I feel like, I don't know that Trump could even anticipate the swerve, which is, hey, there might be some serious corruption here. I don't think Trump is even planning on the fact that they're gonna go like, oh, he's destroying history or something like that. Like at this point, I'm not even sure that you can anticipate the silliness.
They released the donors. The donors are a who's who of big tech companies, and there's a whole lot of you can have an entirely separate ethical discussion of what it means that they are funding this ballroom. But I do think you're right, Seth, that the swerve to we care about historical integrity by the party that actively cheered on the toppling of statues of our founding fathers just a few years ago and can't even say the word Christopher Columbus on, once a year. That to me is ridiculous. But yes,
I don't agree because he was sneaky and prevaricating about the size of the project.
Oh, absolutely. No,
he
I mean, he
announced it.
did,
So
he
that
was not
means
forthcoming.
he either had a bad contract or he didn't want to get attacked for it before the bill. This is a famous New York City
This is a developer's tool.
landlord thing, which is get the wrecking balls going before they're onto you,
Right.
because they could do a stop order with the court. Now, there is no stop order against him, but his idea was, we're going to announce we're going to build a ballroom, doing a lot of this stuff in the White House. And then it's like, wait, you're actually removing the entire East Wing? When did that happen? It's sort of a funny, so he did have some inkling that he was up to something sneaky.
Right, but I mean, he understands that he's up to something sneaky, but the criticism that came in avoided fairly obvious sneaky things to go after, like, do you have the authority to do this, and who are the donors and stuff like that, and went straight to the moon with all this East Wing
I want to
history
praise Ross Douthat, who last week wrote a really one of those sort of weird syntheses idea columns where you go, oh my God, you're onto something that only you could have thought of, which is he's like, look, there needs to be a ballroom. No rational person would say that the president can't entertain people properly in the White House by having, a tent city put up. That's ridiculous, and this is fine. But the Democratic response indicates a problem with the Democratic Party and its approach to, as he described it, beauty, preservation, and the future. So the Democrats have turned out in cities and places like that, or let's say the liberal establishment, really good at preserving. Like where I live, my building is now in a historic district here in New York, which means that nobody can do anything like the costs of doing anything on our building are incredibly expensive because it has to look exactly the way it did in 1908 and all of that. That's an effort to preserve New York's historical legacy without allowing people to simply bulldoze and rebuild without any eye toward what made New York, New York. And they're really good at that, and they do it all over the country, except with the statues and some of that historical legacy. But they stink at beauty. They stink at building new beauty. Case in point, the Obama Library, the hideousness of the Obama Library, which seems to be the point. In other words, Obama didn't say, what I really want is a beautiful building that will last for hundreds of years. He was making some kind of a statement we don't entirely understand with the hideousness of this building. And they make it impossible for there to be progress because they block the construction of new projects by making them prohibitively expensive using regulations. Here in New York City, for example, Zohran Mamdani is running for mayor on an affordability agenda. And remarkably enough, there is a way to build affordable housing in New York City that involves not taxing billionaires, but by deregulating the overregulated construction codes, half of which were put in place to enrich the building trades, which are mafia controlled, or at least were mafia controlled. And Democrats have no antibodies in their system that says, what you have to do is let a real estate developer build something with, materials that he can afford if you want him to build something where he can make an apartment that can be rented for $1,500 a month for a family of five. That's the abundance
agenda. That's the Ezra Klein sort of argument they're making.
Even Ezra Klein, in his book, as Michael Warnoff said in his review of it, they're like, we need abundance. So here's what we do it. We announce a project and want to build, yada, yada, yada. It gets built and it's affordable. And now we have abundance. And yada, yada, yada is the sticking point. Because how do you make something affordable and abundant? You have to lower the cost of its construction. And the only way you can lower the cost of its construction is to deregulate, and they love regulation. They love regulation. They dream of regulation. And so Ross managed in this column to put all this together in a sort of new synthesis that I thought was incredibly insightful, which is that, again, using the antibody thing, like Democrats had no antibodies, or Democrats didn't even know how to begin to attack the ballroom, because they don't know how to talk about needing new things and building new things in America without getting twisted up in their own, we need this, we have to have this safety measure.
Well, the best critique of the ballroom, actually, I think, was one of Matt and our colleagues, Gary Schmidt, wrote a short opinion piece in The Hill, I think it was, that just said, look, there was a way to do this where there was some process involved that would actually make people feel like thoughtfulness went into the destruction of something that a lot of people have an emotional connection to. It's the White House. And it was very, but only a conservative can actually make that case, right, for exactly the reasons you're saying.
Right. Okay.
I just want to make a distinction between the White House and the wings of the White House. Yeah. I think this is kind of overlooked. When Trump said he wasn't going to disturb the structure, he meant the house, right? The White House. Yeah. He hasn't touched the White House.
But Americans still make that distinction.
I do. I'm an American.
I know. Most people think of the whole.
People are upset, as Seth joked about, because the president's movie theater is gone. I mean, come on.
No, but look, you're making a very important point. And we lived in Washington. All of us have lived in Washington. The picture of the White House that people see, right, from Pennsylvania Avenue, where people are on the lawn broadcasting from when they're standing there on the lawn in front of the White House, does not show the west and east wings of the White House,
It's residents
that are
yeah.
behind.
And people know the West Wing because of Aaron Sorkin.
Right.
But by the way, the West Wing's incredibly small and old.
I know.
One day that needs to be.
And the show itself, actually, that was a key theme of the show, The West Wing. When they hired people, they put them in windowless basement broom closets as offices.
Yeah, because they do. Anyway, my point is that what people think of as the White House, which is why
what
the
Trump
only
thinks of
powerful
as the White
picture-
House, which is the House.
But the only powerful picture, therefore, was the picture of your earth mover, like whatever it was, Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel taking down the East Wing. But the only vantage point from which you see the East Wing is from East Street or F Street or something, and nobody's on those anymore.
Well, it's how you got in. That was the entrance to the tour, to the regular tours.
Okay.
You went in through the East Wing. That was the way most people would interact with it.
But my point is, like, there was even a time when Washingtonians would routinely see that side of the White House because they could drive on these streets that are behind the White House.
Yeah, we used to
and
have
they've been shut down for 20 years.
My other, but what I really wanted to say was, though, I think Christine is right. That all the arguments against a lot of Trump actions come down to he's not following the process.
Yeah.
He's not following the process. But from his point of view and the point of view of his supporters, if you follow the process, nothing will happen.
You're a sucker.
For exactly the reason. Well, yeah, I mean, maybe that added, but just nothing will happen because of what John Podhoretz is saying. That there are so many veto points in our system that have accumulated over time that is become almost impossible to do anything. And Trump's difference is that because he doesn't care about process, he actually creates facts on the ground.
Right.
So that if you did follow the process, when would we have got in the ballroom? Maybe 10 years from now at a cost cost of what the Federal Reserve is costing to renovate its building.
How long did it take?
I see that. I see that in a lot of what he does, but he adds something extra. For example, he's once again joking about his third term as president.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just saying we're going to cut through. I mean, if it is, then I'm worried. If that's how he's thinking about this, we're just going to cut through the process whereby a president can't serve a third term. What is that? Is that the shadow he wants to make the opposition crazy? Is that his temperament where he's just being a troll because he gets a kick out of it? Yeah, I mean, so it's a combination of this sort of like
it's also
no
he
nonsense.
Probably would want to run for a third term. Eisenhower wanted to run.
Well, I'm sure he does want to. Yeah,
Reagan wanted to run. He couldn't. Clinton wanted to run. He couldn't. So Trump says, "I'd love to do it."
Yeah.
And then what does he say? He says, "Well, I'm not going to do the fancy plan,
the vice
presidential plan, where he runs as J.D. Vance as vice president, and then Vance resigns, and so
the
technically,
Medvedev. You mean the Putin
it'd be the Medvedev.
Yeah.
Even then, it's different because I mean the plan is ludicrous, and Trump said as much in that appearance on Air Force One where he talked about 2028. And then the second thing he said was, J.D. and Marco are so great. Together, they'd be unstoppable. Yeah. So what he's doing is, one, he likes the idea because he's Donald Trump, right? And two,
you say every president likes the idea.
Most presidents, but two, I mean, he takes it a little bit more. He talks about it more often than the others. I mean, Reagan said a few times that, oh gosh, if not for the amendment, I would definitely run it. But he also understands that his leverage on the Republican Party depends on his non-lame duckness. Sorry, it's awkward, but it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I've only had one cup of coffee. He has to present the image of power and strength for as long as possible, because the second he becomes a lame duck, his power begins to seep away.
There's also there's only one other pressure point to this narrative we're describing of him, bulldozing ahead because otherwise things wouldn't get done. And that's that it throws every major policy question that he's, not going to Congress for, but doing himself into litigation in the court system. And the only point that what concerns me about a lot of the rhetoric coming out of his administration, not just occasionally from him, but often from, the Stephen Millers of the world, is the attempt to, attack the justice system itself, which does have to litigate his bulldozing a lot of norms. So when you're doing the bulldozing, I don't care about process, I just want to get things done. And then the courts say, well, hold on a minute, because you might not be allowed to do that constitutionally. And then he's got the Stephen Millers of the world saying, these federal judges are corrupt, we've got to attack the justice system. That's, I think, where the American public goes, well, wait a minute. I mean, I think people are willing to let him push those boundaries. That's why he was elected. Yes. No, but I'm saying people elected him to break the rules. I get that. But we do have a system, and it's not just me who thinks the system needs to hold, because whoever comes after him is going to test it in the same way. That's how it works.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second by reading you something by A.N. Hoffman from the New York Sun, who's a very brilliant writer, law school graduate, Stanford Law School graduate, has a scoop today. President Trump's filing of a 111-page briefing arguing that his hush money convictions were, quote, fatally marred and ought to be overturned is a landmark in his effort to undo his status as a convicted felon. So this is the Manhattan jury case presided over by Juan Merchan. This is the Alvin Bragg case where he was convicted for those 34 counts of how he paid off Stormy Daniels, the 34 checks that he wrote. And if you remember, this was controversial when the case was filed, and then when it was, because ordinarily this would be a misdemeanor case, the way that it was executed. And Alvin Bragg indicted him on the grounds that the misdemeanor was, he could raise it to a felony because there was a second crime that was being committed by doing it this way, and that Bragg didn't have to tell the jury or anybody what the second crime was. And Judge Merchan said, sure, okay, you don't have to tell anybody what the crime was. And everybody that I know went, wait, what? What do you mean this is okay? And when the conviction came through, even though people were celebrating it, even then sort of like serious legal scholars on the left were like, I don't know what the situation is here. How is this possible? And Trump is going to court. He is being defended by a major law firm. I can't remember, so I'm looking through the story to figure it out. Anyway, but basically he's saying this case should never have been brought. The jury instructions were wrong. Judge Merchan's jury instructions were faulty. Judge Merchan had himself a conflict of interest because his daughter is a Democratic political activist and worker. And he also said, not only don't you have to know what the crime is, the jury doesn't even have to be unanimous. So he basically is saying this case should never have been brought, and it should be dismissed, and therefore his convictions as a felon should be expunged. Now, I read this morning. I haven't talked to the people I usually talk to about how strong this case is. And I'll call Andy McCarthy to ask him. But it looks kind of strong to me. And here's because of the way everybody was talking about the case 2 years ago or 3 years ago when it was brought. And all of these objections were raised by people in the bringing of the case. So I'm raising this today to say that we say Trump is the violator of norms, but his overarching view is that all norms were violated in the pursuit and attempted destruction of him. So as Oliver Twist's orphan jailer, Mr. Bumble, says, if the law says that, sir, then the law is a ass. He's basically saying they used the legal system against me. They secured these. Here's a case. This was the most damaging case against me. And it was false and it's wrong. And I'm not saying, all right, forget it. I beat it, basically because I won the presidency. He is going in and saying, I want this expunged. Imagine what it will mean for the future of lawfare, which I think we all oppose, if he succeeds in this case before the New York Supreme Court. Maybe he can't. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But we're all like, lawfare is destroying everything. In every, all over the world, lawfare is being used as a technique, both in the international courts, like in this, I believe the lawfare case against Bibi Netanyahu in the Israeli courts. If you pursue lawfare, the one successful real case you get in the lawfare pursuit here is expunged because Trump has enough money to pursue this case forever and has a law firm willing to take the case to the courts. Maybe it's good that he's a norm violator.
Well, if he wins, I'm sure Letitia James Comey, and John Bolton will all be hoping to use similar arguments.
Exactly. Okay.
If they get there.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to say that, because he's, as Christine points out, he's not just trying to expunge the injustice done to him.
Yeah.
He's also launching these politicized cases against
it's
his
dodgeball
critics.
rules. It's dodgeball rules.
Right.
If you knock out the one that knocked these three players out, these three players get to come back in the game.
But that's an important point. But I'm just saying, in the sort of from the perspective of history. So he's like, they did everything against me, so I'm going to use this the same way they use it against me, unless we have a precedent that says, stop doing this stuff.
Okay, right. So this is the dodgeball.
Okay.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. We need someone to start, like, he's throwing wrenches now, but then he's saying, I'm playing by the old dodgeball rules, but he's throwing wrenches at his opponents. I mean, he can't, and again, it's not just him. It's the way that some of the rhetoric of his administration, the delegitimization of our legal and justice system, which of course did not begin with Donald Trump, as for all the reasons we've just described, nevertheless does still require someone to play by the rules. And he wants to follow the rules for his own personal sense of justice, as you're showing in this case. But that means that the rules have to be restored for, it's a real contradiction.
I think the test of what you're saying, Christine, is the Supreme Court. When you attack some of these district judges for being partisan hacks, you have a point. In a lot of cases. I mean, and the abuse of the nationwide injunction power became so egregious that the court stepped in earlier this year. The Supreme Court stepped in. It's very rare for a president to defy an order of the United States Supreme Court. And Donald Trump has not done that.
Well, he has with TikTok. The TikTok case was
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not quite the same as an order.
Right.
I hate to be legalistic here. It upheld the statute. But you're right. And that's one of the worst things he's done, in my view.
Yeah.
But that's the real test. Is the Supreme Court going to issue a ruling directing Trump to do something? And will he, for the first time, say no? Now, we've been in that place in American history before, and it's very awkward. But that is what would rise to, in my view, a constitutional crisis.
Right.
And we're not there yet.
Right. And the thing is, I think his impulse, 79-year-old man, however rule-breaking he is, however antinomian he is, and all of that, he still has this, well, this is the judge with the golden gavel on the Supreme Court. And, that's as far as I go.
He has said multiple times he would follow a Supreme Court ruling. But I'm saying
in his own head. However, somebody, because you mentioned Voldemort's name, I will, I guess I can say, like, the Stephen Millers of this administration do not think this. They believe that everything is political, everything is about power, and that you assert your power when you have it, and you dare someone to take it away from you. And so far, they have reason to believe that that is an effective strategy because Congress has so abdicated its oversight responsibilities and the responsibility it has to act on behalf of its own rules, like the TikTok ban. Congress is doing nothing because Republicans in Congress are afraid of Trump or like Trump or afraid of their voters or however you want to slice it. And if you're taking lessons inside the administration, you have on the one hand, there's Trump sitting there as the conservative. And then you have all of these right-wing Jacobins in the administration who want to exercise power as they deem fit, whether or not they should or they should be allowed to, or there's any precedent that makes it legal. That's the dynamic here, which is that he is constantly being pushed. If in the first term, he was being restrained by the establishmentarians that he hired in the White House and in the cabinet agencies not to do this. He now has people in direct positions of power who themselves want to violate all the rules. At the Justice Department, at the FBI, his chief domestic policy advisor, all of these people who are revolutionaries and do not like the norms and think the norms are there to restrain the true will of the people. That's why I use the term Jacobin. I mean, I do think that there is something Jacobinist in this Trumpian worldview, and it's obviously very tempting to him because he believes in the exercise of power. And so therefore being told, you know what, you could try it, I wouldn't, because, think of your historical legacy. And, Trump, I think he does think of his historical legacy. I think he thinks that like the Israel-Gaza peace deal is his historical legacy. I mean, he thinks he's settling a 3,000-year conflict. I don't know where he got that number from, but that's where he, and he was put on earth for a reason, survived the Butler assassination attempt for a reason. That's where his brain is going. And as for all of this, it's like all these rules are here meant to sort of keep bad people in power and let bad people do to him what they want to. And so when he has someone whispering in his ear and saying, do whatever you want because what they are is bad, and so you're good, and therefore everything you do is good, that's pretty tempting. And he doesn't have any resistance to it.
Although one little side anecdote from the stories about the ballroom that struck me is that he was surprised to find out that he could do whatever he wanted, that he didn't have to submit to a process, that was sort of a formality that he could overlook and did. That struck me because it means that even someone who was a kind of brash developer mindset deal maker was like, really? I can do anything? And that is in a way what puts a brake on some of his worst impulses.
I think he's in a race to build the ballroom faster and cheaper than Jerome Powell's renovations at the Federal Reserve.
Which are endless. So every time you drive by there,
it's the whole Woolman Reed mentality. Yeah. He wants to say, "Look, I demolished it. I built it." Remember when the demolition was happening? He had a press availability at the White House, and he was like, "That sound you hear of the bulldozers, it's to me the most beautiful sound in the world." Yeah. This is who he is, and so I think there's that kind of competitive edge. Yeah, he probably thrilled at the news that he didn't have to go through as complicated process as for the Trump hotel renovations, right?
But that moment took place in the transition in 2016. If you remember, Trump said at his first press conference when he won the election, I mean, of course, I'm going to have to divest myself of my businesses like that. He assumed that was the case. And then he hired a lawyer, I can't remember who it was, to help him. And the lawyer said, you know what? You don't have to divest yourself of your businesses. You're the president. Those rules involve
it was just
inferior
the norm.
Officers.
Yeah.
It's a norm, but they involve inferior. No one with this kind of ongoing business has ever run for president in the same way.
Right.
You don't have to do it. And then you saw when he came out and said, I don't have to do it, his eyes widened.
That was quite a press conference that day.
The president of
like
the
a
United
kid at Christmas
was the executive branch, and that he didn't have to do things that way because who was going to prosecute him? for it. He was the executive branch. He is the justice system.
It's like he
according to our
told
Constitution.
Jeffrey Goldberg in the Atlantic interview. This time I run the country and the world.
Yeah.
Well,
Matt.
can he, I would just like to turn his attention very quickly, by the way. Once he's finished with the ballroom, there's a couple of tunnels underneath the Hudson that
I
could
thought you were
really
talking about the
use.
tunnels underneath Gaza City, but okay, yes, the tunnels underneath the Hudson.
He should go on tour fixing America as the president who doesn't have to get the green groups and other.
It would be the real infrastructure week. Finally, we'd have infrastructure week.
That's right. He should stop with the policing and actually finish the Gateway Tunnel. That's been needed for 100 years. Yeah, bring in the wise guys.
He's not going to help Chuck
Bring
Schumer.
in the wise guys. We know from The Sopranos that they're all right wing. They want to fight terror.
You think he's going to help Zoran Mamdani by fixing that tunnel?
Well, how about if Mamdani loses and Chitterelli wins? Maybe there he has an incentive.
Maybe there's your opportunity.
Okay, Matt, you have a recommendation.
Thanks, John. Listeners to this podcast know I enjoy a good caper. And so I just finished a great caper novel that I unexpectedly read. I picked it up at the bookstore just last week. It's a novel called Sheepdogs by the writer Elliot Ackerman. Elliot Ackerman, a very decorated veteran of the global war on terror, who turned to writing. He's written many books, but this is the first I've read of his. Elliot Ackerman's written memoirs. He's written novels. He's written kind of future histories of conflicts with China. But Sheepdogs is kind of it's a caper novel. It's kind of like what was that Tom Cruise movie, American
Made,
yeah, that came out about the CIA and kind of a CIA caper. It involves an ex-special operator who has kind of down on his luck because of his kind of interactions with the CIA, and so he answers an email from a person who goes only by Sheepdog, who kind of runs an email chat group of ex-special operators from all the various branches of the military, and gives them tasks or help me out. And the email from Sheepdog says, "Can friends, I need you to recover this private jet that is in an airfield in Uganda." And so the main character enlists his friend, who was a Afghan pilot who escaped the fall of Kabul and who was also down on his luck as a refugee in America living in Texas, to go to Uganda to ferry away this private jet. And they think it's going to be a very easy job and it's going to land them pretty good money. And that's where the adventure begins. And it's told breezily, a great prose style. It's comic. There's exciting turns. You learn a lot about special operators and different, rankings within the special forces community. And you also learn about the CIA. And so I finished it in a couple of days. It was a lot of fun. I think people will have fun with it as well. So Sheepdogs by Elliot Ackerman.
Look, there are obvious celebrity reviewers for this book, given how you describe it. Zoran and Mahmoud Mamdani.
It's a Uganda connection.
Because I love the Uganda through line that
very
we're establishing this week on the podcast.
It's an interest. I really know Elliot Ackerman from his journalism.
Yeah.
I mean, and he writes, and he's a very good journalist. Mm-hmm. And so what's fun about Sheepdogs is it incorporates some detail and commentary about both the fall of Kabul and the end of the Afghan war and the ongoing war in Ukraine. And so you get flavors of contemporary events, but it's also just kind of a fun little spy crime novel. I hope it's the beginning of a series. It seems like it could be, and I hope that there are additional assignments, additional entries, because as much as I love a caper, I love a good series.
There we go. Okay, quickly before we go, we're just going to leave. I'm just going to say, I don't want to fill you with hope only to just crush your dreams. So it's very important that you understand that what I'm saying here is very unlikely to happen. But you're going to see over the next couple of days, if there is if there's sort of political betting over the next couple of days, that the Mamdani bet in New York is going to start looking worse, and the Cuomo bet in New York is going to start looking better as a result of data from these 3 days of early voting, polling that shows Cuomo tightening the race by half, and a couple of other things. It is very unlikely that Cuomo will prevail. It appears possible that Cuomo will deny Mamdani a landslide or something like that, or that something very big is happening. But I'm only mentioning this to say that this is the political story in New York. You've been hearing about it. We've all been very apocalyptic about it. And I don't think that there's any reason to get any less apocalyptic about it, really. But you have to take the evidence before you as it comes. And something is happening. It may be too late. It may be just ectopic life and nothing real. But it is something to get your hopes up only to have them dashed. So if you want to hope for the best and expect the worst, this is a very, very good moment at which to take our theme song by Mel Brooks to heart. So
if you're in line, stay in line. That's what John is saying. If you're in line at your polling place, stay in line.
Need a bottle of water.
There we go. Yeah,
like Larry David.
A bottle of water, and
we'll give it to you.
You'll get arrested. Right? Exactly. Okay. Till tomorrow, for Seth, Matt, Christine, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.